Welcome to another episode of the show your parents warned you about. It's Reefer After Dark. Today, I have a special guest. It is a Dr. Robert Dotson. How are you, friend?
Doing
Um,
well, doing well.
I know I met you because I wanted to get a medical marijuana card and went and saw you to get that, which was nice. I appreciate it. I know you've
Mhm.
done loads of work in the medical field before you went into the medical cannabis field. Um, so if you want to tell people just your bona fides there, that would probably help the friends at home.
I, I'm a graduate from University of Tennessee, undergraduate, and went to medical school in Memphis. Graduated in 1974 and pursued ophthalmology. So I did a residency and internship residency in Memphis, and then I was in the Army for a couple of years, active duty, and then did a fellowship up in New York City. And came back to East Tennessee, had a practice there for 30 years doing cataracts and LASIK. And 2012, I moved out to Seattle, and that's where I kind of stumbled into cannabis medicine. I was
Gotcha.
completely clueless.
Um, so what got you into that field in particular? Anything that you saw while doing your work
Well,
then?
yeah, long involved thing. We were in early 2012. We were traveling abroad in India and specifically, and India is covered in indica. There's It's 10 foot high in all the ditches. So the person I was with was having a lot of pain and said, "I'm going to go get some of these leaves and chew on this stuff and see what happens." And she did, and they did, and the pain went away. So that got my attention. So when I got back to Seattle, I began to explore the medicine angle of this because I really was completely ignorant about the whole thing. And my son at the time was there, and he had job-related PTSD as a paramedic. A long involved thing, but he unfortunately took his life, and that really pushed me over the edge. And since then, I've seen thousands of people, and I haven't seen anyone it hasn't helped, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, I can't hear you, Reed.
Sorry.
There you go.
It's that every cell in your body has cannabinoid receptors. I always found that interesting.
Pretty
You know,
much. Right. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
like what is do you know what the body does with those cannabinoids like in general or I mean I know they're
Well,
helpful.
there's an endocannabinoid system, and all animals above spider level have that. And what that system mainly does, and this is just a kind of a high level view, but what it does is it helps regulate the autonomic nervous system, the HPA axis, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And so when you throw cannabinoids at an organism, then it enables that person or creature to achieve balance within that autonomic nervous system, homeostasis.
Right.
So everything up and down that axis gets better. So immune function, inflammation, mood, sleep, those kind of things tend to get better.
I mean I know I saw you right at the almost the height of COVID. Did you see a lot of people seeing like parallels between that homeostasis of that immune system and COVID, like protecting yourself against that in regards.
Well,
Um,
it does have anti-COVID or antiviral properties. I've through COVID, it really that's been a disastrous
yep.
thing, the whole planet. But um, cannabis has helped mainly, is my feeling, because it decreases inflammation and it helps with anxiety, depression. Because
Mm.
with COVID, with severe illness, but especially with COVID as an example, with comorbidities related to COVID death, hospitalization. Number one comorbidity is morbid obesity. Number two, though, is guess what? It's anxiety. And
Okay.
then you get down to diabetes and cancer and all that other stuff. So anxiety, PTSD kind of stuff, it is a killer for immune function. So it weakens the body's defenses, immune system.
Okay. And I mean, weed has always helped my anxiety for sure. You know,
Absolutely.
I've had was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, which that causes its whole load of other fun complexes on top of it.
Yeah,
But
that's a trauma thing too,
yep.
really. Yeah.
Um, I know when I first met you, you mentioned Gabor Mate. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
gave me his flyer and stuff. I think, I know his son more than I know him mainly. And I think
Right.
when you gave him that flyer, I looked into him more. Um,
Yeah.
he's an interesting cat for sure. Canadian psychologist, right?
Well,
I think
he's actually family practice, I think, but his main thing is trauma
trauma.
and addiction.
Yeah.
So that's what he's worked a lot with homeless and the addiction community and
Yeah.
people with trauma, PTSD kind of stuff. Because
I have.
the reason I stumbled across him, he came out with that little movie I shared with you about
Yes.
6 months ago. I'd never heard of him. I'd heard of Aaron, but I didn't realize his dad was doing that work. And he really, his work really shows what I've learned in about my 10 years of doing this, just kind of as a Johnny come lately to the scene. And he has a lot of very useful videos online, and he's written a lot of books. He has a good one on ADD, ADHD, as a
I
matter.
have a clip from him on that here in a bit. But you're mainly talking about the Wisdom of Trauma, that documentary, right?
Yes, yep,
Okay.
the wisdomtrauma.com, and people can sign up
This
and
I think that website, correct? You can't
yes,
see it.
it's
There you
it's
go.
just yeah, that's it. Yep.
But yeah, what did you learn the most from that film? Um, anything in particular?
The big thing out of it was it confirmed me in what I've discovered in my own little ramblings through alt med, like I've been doing the past decade, because he confirmed the centrality of trauma to most of the stuff we see in medicine. I'm convinced life trauma, has got to be the number one health problem on the planet,
Right.
and really 95% of illness really comes from that because the trauma it dysregulates our own body's ability to balance, to heal. So mainstream medicine, they don't get it. They don't get it. Everything is mechanistic, reductionist, pharmacentric, and it's gotten worse in the 50 years I've been in medicine. Um, it's really kind of sad, but doing what I do now, of course, I get a self-selected group of patients, and they usually end up going to the pot doctor when all else fails,
Right.
and they get better, and they get better, and they get off a lot of their meds, and
Well,
it's
and that's been my, I also take, androidal salt with my ADHD. So like having that like cannabis on top of that to help deal with the symptoms of like using that
yeah,
medication
yeah.
is
I'd make a goal of getting off that. I mean,
yeah.
it's just ADHD is not caused by an absence of methamphetamines.
Yes, exactly. But it's so nice in the morning. It's the best
Yeah,
coffee. It's like I had
yeah.
to tell people with that too, like just like any other medicine, we have to, take precautions. It's why, I'm constantly hydrating myself. It makes you nauseous to know it's not fun, but luckily our
Yeah.
society is built in a way that, you kind of need something, but
Well, that gets off of the political side of it. But really, our kind of end stage pirate corporatist thing we have going on here. It is so destructive to humans. You
Yeah.
know, uh, the socioeconomic pressures, the constant badgering and division and stuff done by the ruling elite, man, is just
So much
it's
like
just overwhelming.
it's just lovely and enlightening, you know, and like just fills you with so much joy, does it not?
Yeah,
Um, you
yeah,
know, but I did bring this video by Dr. Gabramate on kind of what you're
yeah.
talking about. If you want to, we'll watch that for a
Sure,
second.
yeah, sure.
So
Go
that's
ahead.
so trauma is not just personal; it's also cultural and it's historical, and it's also transgenerational. And you just
Absolutely.
can't help passing it on. So
Yeah.
if I carry trauma, I can be sure to pass it on to my kids unless I've resolved it, worked it out. And to the extent that I've resolved it, I don't pass it on. And to the extent that I haven't resolved it, we do pass it on. And now if you look at the larger question of why are so many kids being diagnosed, well, you know it can't be a genetic problem because genes don't change in a population over 5 years or 10 years. So if you're seeing much more ADHD in Norway now, there's a good reason for it. And the reason
Mhm.
is that
Yeah.
must be, and I don't know much about Norway, but the reason must be that the parenting environment is less and less comfortable for kids. The parents are more and more stressed. The parents are more and more busy. The parents are more and more distracted. Marriages are more conflictual. Maybe there's more depressed people around. Economic stress for both people to work. Communities maybe are less connected. There's less and less of that
Absolutely.
village, of that attachment village, of that hunter-gatherer type union between people.
Absolutely.
So because that's what globalization does, is it just keeps destroying and destroying and destroying the basis of human existence in the name of economic progress. And so more and more parents are stressed. Guess what? More kids are going to get diagnosed. And then we say, the kid's got a disease, let's give him a pill. Rather than looking at, well, what is it about the environment? Because the good news is, and I'll talk about that later again if I have a chance, is that the brain can develop new circuits, as I mentioned before. The question is, what conditions is required for that? And if we really understood the implications of the science and the wisdom, then the questions would be asking ourselves, okay, if all these kids are developing problems, what conditions are causing that? And what conditions do we have to create to lead them in a new direction, to help them reconnect?
It feels almost
Yeah.
like Freudian
Excellent.
psychology, like in a way where it's like looking at the underlying problems, you know?
Well, it's mainstream medicine tends to increasingly approach humans as in a very reductionist fashion. So and the system has made it so that doctors don't have time to interact with patients, and they don't ask questions. They don't go about over their history half the time, or they have a PA or somebody else that's another intervention layer between them and the patient. So, and it's all driven by corporate profit, see, so they're all on a clock, so they don't have time to spend with anybody. And the other problem is everything is reduced to a pharmacentric answer of some kind. No matter what the symptom, we got a drug for it. And that's drug that causes side effects. We got drugs for the side effects, and we have drugs for the side effects of the side effect. And so you see people frequently that are on 20, 30 medicines. And the interactions are never studied. They feel terrible. They get worse all the time. Every time they go back to their doctor, they get another pill. And it's just, it shouldn't be that way. But the whole system is built around that number one, corporate profit thing. And number two, this kind of reductionist view of humans. Everything's medicalized. I should say that everything's pharmacalized.
Yeah.
And become something you need a pill for, you know.
Well, no,
So
no push for like actual, preventative measures, like physical rehab and things like that, or just standard
Well, see,
dietary help, or
yeah,
you
Reef,
know,
there's no money in it.
oh,
There's
right,
no money.
yes,
That's the
yeah.
problem.
I mean, it's whatever your insurance company is willing to give you, essentially, and if you can get that, you know.
Right,
So
right.
I find it interesting. What do you think, like, you see coming into your practice the most when it comes to the search for, like non-pharmaceutical medicines? What do you think? What do you see the most coming in for that?
The conditions,
Yeah.
yeah. Pro- None, right up at the top is anxiety, depression, and in reality, 90% of that, 95% of that really is trauma, life trauma. It's usually family, but it can be anything, and it can be just like Dr. Mate said, it can be socioeconomic or physical or emotional or you know um, any of those kind of things can cause trauma that, and it's all additive over time. So
Right.
it can be bunch of small things that suddenly break out and have physical ramifications.
Yeah, I mean, I
Uh,
think
so
the the thing I've seen with
mood type
Mate
stuff.
specifically is, and I'm not sure if I understand it completely. I think he's saying that that trauma can alter the brain chemistry to a point where some of those genetic problems appear more likely. You know,
Yes,
I'm not,
yes.
and he's not
And
denying the brain chemistry. Is I think the
that's correct. Yeah,
yeah,
that's correct. And the genetic code is an important thing. All it really mostly what it indicates is predispositions, and certain conditions allow these uh, conditions, say a cancer or some kind of whatever, to manifest, or an autoimmune disease.
mm,
So some people are more susceptible to levels of trauma or disease or injury given their particular genetic map and family. But nutrition plays a role in it, and the environment plays a role in it too, just like he was saying. So
yeah,
all that's collective, and just because you have a gene that indicates your risk for
yeah,
cancer doesn't mean that you're going to cancer. So, so there are other things you can do to modify, um, nutritionally supplement things, and things that can kind of offset the genetic
yeah,
tendency, if you will. Now, an interesting thing is that, and Dr. Mate was talking about it a little bit, but it gets to be, these things get to be, the trauma gets to be multi-generational often,
yeah,
because the gene code actually is changed somewhat because of epigenetics within a generation or so. So that's one reason I think you see kind of multi-generational families that have a history of abuse, for instance.
yeah.
You'll
Al-
find families that,
alcoholism. Yeah, I mean, you could go through
yeah,
the list
yeah,
of schizophrenia,
bipolar or
bipolar. Yep. Yep.
schizophrenic or
Welcome to my family
schizophrenic.
tree, doctor. um, you know, so,
Yeah. We used to
but
joke about East Tennessee. A lot of the family trees up there don't have any forks.
yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, especially living down here in the South. Um, but it's that, my father's father grew up on dirt floors. It's that sort of generational
right,
trauma of,
right.
not having enough, barely making it,
Yep.
constantly worried about what the children are going to be able to accomplish,
Right.
that sort of thing.
Right.
Speaking of
And
accomplishments,
yeah,
um,
I have patients of all backgrounds that have just been to hell and back in their family situation. They've been homeless, or they've been south side of Chicago, gunfire everywhere, and
yeah,
they've had multiple family members murdered or suicided, and that stuff is, that kind of trauma is physically it ends up being physically destructive. So you get illness and inflammation and lupus and all these other weird autoimmune things.
Yeah.
All those people too usually are poor. They have poor nutrition typically because of their environment. I mean, it's
Yeah.
and we
Eating
do in this
nothing
country.
but
The
corn in
richest
the
country,
South, you say is bad, you know, like,
right?
so it just took us getting dysentery a few times to figure that one out. We at least
Yeah,
added, enriched, bleached flour to our diet. Down here, we're not just feeding them cornmeal all day.
right.
But I'm curious about like what steps you had to take to get into the, medical cannabis field here. Um, just what roadblocks
Uh,
are there and
as a physician,
yeah.
okay. Well, in Florida, uh, Florida has medical um, cannabis laws, and so certain conditions like seizure disorder or cancer or end of life situations, lupus, all sorts of stuff, PTSD,
Yeah.
qualify under the Department of Health regulations for getting a medical recommendation. And the state mandates that to do that, you have to be seen by MD or DO who's been cannabis certified, which sadly doesn't mean a lot. Basically, you have to pay for a state course, mainly to learn the legalities of it.
Right.
So there needs to be, well, and there's starting to be more education in the medicine. Part of the problem with cannabis medicine is, see, the government's blocked research and education and everything else my whole career.
Right.
That's starting to change now. Now you can there are some decent courses that deal with medical cannabis, and so physicians can get up to speed. I kind of just was an OJT to get started. And I took some courses and read a ton of books, and I've seen thousands of people now. So I've kind of I've been practicing. I've been practicing the past decade.
Right. That's crazy. The I'm wondering what you think like the, cannabis legalization process here in Florida will look like in the future. Um,
Yeah,
what you would want to see even. Um,
uh, I think the state ought to have recreational. This is a tourist state. They're allowing literally billions of dollars to walk out the door. So I think you would think that the powers that be would look at that when they're smacking their lips and try to push through. Now, the problem is there's opposing forces that are invested in the way things are. You got the liquor industry, you got big pharma, you got the
yeah.
prison industrial complex, you got big mainstream medicine hates this still, especially academics. So you're up against um, some very moneyed interests and powerful interests. That's starting to change somewhat as new, younger politicians come in, but still the old guard is stuck in this war on drugs thing and filling all the prisons and getting everybody to drink and take their
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals. You know?
I'm wondering,
Because they're all profiting from it. They're all paid off. See,
I've always felt like, here in Florida, when I got my medical card, it cost around, I want to say 300 altogether, really,
yeah, at least, yeah,
at least, right? And then you're constantly like, I just got a text today saying my like, what was it? I wanted to get the wording again. It was like my referral, something like that.
yeah,
Recommendation. That's it.
yeah,
Yeah. Was about to run out, and I'm like, oh, well, that means I got to give him some more
yeah.
dough. You know.
It's a It's a frustrating thing. Now, I got into this in Washington State. Now, Washington State, as an example, they had medical out there beginning in about 1996. So they had medical clinics, they had medical dispensaries until 2015. Now, 2015, they brought in recreational. They shut down all medical clinics. They did away with all the medical side of it and forced everybody into rec shops where they could tax it more. So there was a real transition problem there for a while because it's a lot smaller state than Florida, but they had about 350,000 patients. And suddenly there was no real support for them because the rec shops early were not geared to dealing with medical issues at all. Took them about 2 years to catch up. But the bad news is, up until 2015, the law was medical cannabis. And in 2015, they went through the new law. I've got a copy of it, and they crossed out cannabis and wrote in marijuana. Why'd they do that? They did that to re-stigmatize it, and then they put this whole mess under the control of the liquor board. That's the most corrupt body you could possibly use to oversee this stuff. But that's the way it is. So I hope Florida doesn't do that. Now,
Could have just give it to Philip Morris,
yeah, other states, Colorado, California, I think Nevada too. But anyway, they have medical and recreational, and usually the medical side, they get tax breaks and better pricing and better availability of kind of the medical side of stuff.
Yeah.
And they usually let the patients grow plants.
Well, that was my next question. Was, do you see that here in Florida? As we know, Florida has that vertical integration clause with its legalization stuff, right? Where it essentially means you have to own the entire production. You got to own your, your laboratories to test it, your grow sites, your distribution centers, shipping, all that stuff. You got to take care, banking.
Don't you wonder why it's that way, Reef?
Well, we definitely know why. It's because it keeps only, how many companies own the cannabis industry here in Florida now? Like 3, 4. You got like True Leave and this the others.
Washington did the same thing. Once they went recreational, they had a lottery for the licenses, and they allowed like 3 or 4 people to buy up all the tickets. So,
yep.
So they got it's the usual suspects, okay?
Yep. And then they price hiked it because they knew, same thing here, right? People bought up licenses and then sold them at top dollar because they knew the only people who could afford the business anyway were going to be people who could afford their price gouging. So,
absolutely.
I'm just curious, do you think that growing your own will at least be, in the future for Florida, near future, hopefully?
I would think so. At some point, Missouri, for heaven's sakes, you can grow 6 plants.
Right.
Missouri, Arkansas, you can grow plants.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible.
I mean, I think it's, to me, they've gate kept this medicine to be essentially, if you are not capable of paying the certain price tag that it comes with now, you're going to get thrown in prison and jail for the same possession. So, when I could imagine just about everyone could get an anxiety, thing right now with the way the world is, but it costs everyone too much to get that process, through. I feel like that's,
those that really would benefit from it most are financially, it's difficult. I mean, you got somebody that's a fast food employee and they live an hour or 2 out of town, and gas is now
ridiculous. Yeah.
They're not making much per hour anyway, and then they've got to take off work and they got to go see the cannabis doctor, and they got to pay them $190 every 7 months, and they got to pay the state $75 every year. And it gets to be prohibitive. Now we have a lot of dispensaries, and that's helped. The competition actually has driven down the prices some, but it's still higher than West Coast, which is a little bit ahead of us.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, they're doing ounces for, $60 over there, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
we
but
we did have telemed here through COVID, and then the state retracted it. Now, interestingly, they did in the last legislature, they reinstated telemedicine for everything, including opiates, except cannabis.
nice.
And that's thanks to the speaker who just left.
Yeah.
He was opposed to cannabis, and so he spent the whole time trying to undo everything. So
I,
thanks to
I
fail.
I always found that interesting that they started that. It's like people with ADHD have been asking for telemed stuff for decades now. It seems like, you know, it's really stuff that's difficult for us to do. We'd love to be able to just hop on and talk to the doctor. It would be great for us. You know,
Yep.
like now it's like, oh well, now it's fine. It's like, what? Why? As if your insurance will let you do that. You know,
Right. There you go. Follow the
so
money once
pretty
again.
much, it's amazing how much that can get you to some answers. But yeah, I just feel like that money gatekeeping on this. I'd love to see it addressed. I don't know of any activist groups here in Florida working on that, but I'm sure I can find some.
There's uh, they are talking about recreational possibly being on the ballot
Mm,
in 2024,
right.
and uh, there's still talk about having a grow permission too, though I'm not sure if that's going to come up again this next season session or not. I am hopeful they'll bring telemed back, because for follow-up visits, there's just no reason
Yeah, make you.
somebody can do that, and
Yeah,
especially the day they killed that back in the spring, it was in April. Um, they killed telemedicine for just for cannabis, but the day they did that, that very morning, I had two patients in a row who worked, McDonald's or Burger King or someplace, like 2 hours outside of town.
yeah,
They both had to, they had to take off and drive in, and the gas was even higher back then. And that was followed by a third person who came by those little city transport buses that bring the disabled lady that had a stroke and was in a wheelchair. And all three of these people we had seen before by telemedicine.
right.
And yet, because of these idiots, they just they just stop that for these people. I mean, they don't think about their act. Well, of course, they don't care about anybody.
No.
They're only interested in their own wallets. So
Yep. And what
it's
the shareholders tell them they should be interested in. Like
yeah,
um, yeah, it's not about the convenience for the consumer or whatever they
oh
feel
Lord,
like they're
no.
doing.
It's about maximal wealth extraction from the peasants. That's what it's about.
Yep. For something that you
I
might need
decided
to
to,
survive,
yeah, yeah. I
like,
think sometimes I think the state actually has a secret department of sadism, and their remit is to sit around and try to figure out how to torture the peasants. What can we do now to make their
they're
life
doing a great
miserable?
job in that division. They're funding that one well. Um, you know, like that must be part of that CIA funding they get.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
like, do you see like a conflict between like recreational legalization and like the medical cannabis industry? Because I feel like those two are like, I mean, I feel like I guess you could have
Uh,
both, but you
I, th-
know,
I think there's I think there's room for both. The problem is the innate greed and envy of some humans, especially those in huge corporate undertakings. You know, they uh, they don't have a lot of sympathy for competition, so they'll do anything to rig the game in their favor. And so at Washington's the state, a case in point. Who's put in control of marijuana? The liquor board.
Yeah,
The liquor.
the liquor board. Jim Beam gonna do well with, like
Right.
what? Which that's one of those, liberal states. They got those liberals up there,
Right. They
Um,
got a few. They got a few.
Same thing with California. I mean, it's, I feel like the industry has kind of became an industry where, I'd love it if it was just, my neighbor, like he sells watermelons at the back of his truck, but,
Right.
at this point, like, but
It
yeah,
was
I mean,
one interesting things which I will probably never see again. But when I first got out to Washington in 2018, they still had the old system. No, in 2012, and they actually had weekend. They had like a flea market, and you could only go if you had a medical card or recommendation. But they had independent little growers in there, and they were selling products and all that. It was wild.
that'd be
Of
nice.
course, they had to get rid of all that. See, if you're
Yeah,
going to
that,
have recreational,
you know, um,
kind of
I've
the
seen
funny thing up
weed
there is that
resorts popping up over there too. I find that interesting. Um, you know, but yeah, I mean, there's so much money in that industry. It's kind of scary how that most of that money you can't put in any like banking system either. Um, like how does that work with
that's
like your payments? I wonder. You know, with like, I mean, if they're not able to use, I know we got to use CanPay here in the state of Florida, right, for buying stuff
yeah.
here, but
It's for doctor services. It's treated differently. So I'm just a contract employee for the company I work for, but that's not really an issue. Where it is an issue is selling the product, and
yeah,
which is still at a federal level. See, it's still
Schedule One, right?
class
Yeah,
illegal and all that other stuff. But
yeah.
thank heavens you got Biden Harris in there. 20 cannabis arrests are up 25% under them.
Isn't that great? And then they want to let you believe that they're like pardoning
Yeah, right.
zero
It was,
federal.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
It is. They're
I
not
could go
pardoning
off
anyone.
on that. No, yeah, literally nobody. Literally, like it's sad. It's all just to get some more votes on an election board from people who
You
aren't
got
paying
it.
attention. But we talk about that.
These are these are the same people that would like to get us into a thermonuclear war. Okay.
God, there's no fighting in the war room. God, um, like they put up Doctor Strangelove free to watch on YouTube, and I questioned why are they putting that up for free? What are they trying to tell
It's
people?
prep work.
Yeah,
It's prep
exactly.
work.
Hey, do your homework, people. Just please don't let there be a cowboy pilot somewhere. Just
Oh my God.
let's
Slim
keep
Pickens.
those. Oh, it's the worst.
I think
You
Slim
know,
Pickens is in the White House, except that he's not
one
quite
of
as
them.
bright.
One of them. Oh, like anyway. But yeah,
The,
there's.
the the real movie to watch with that along that line is On the Beach. If
Mm,
you want to watch a sobering thing, watch that one, On the Beach.
Wag the Dog as well. Recently, we took a
Yeah.
look at.
Oh yeah. That
You
is a good
know,
one.
with that whole green screen thing at that movie. Who's that? Who's the lady in that? Recently had that car accident. Um,
Yeah.
Hurst. I want to say.
Yeah.
Anne Hest,
Hish
or
on Hish is yeah,
yeah,
okay. I'd forgotten she was in that.
yeah. Which is just kind of even funny. Like it's that's an interesting coincidence in my opinion, but not to put on my tinfoil hat on too tightly, but
That's right.
um, but yeah. So do you think I was gonna ask, do you think like ADHD is more genetic or more like learned affectation?
No, there's some genetic probably tendency, but I think it's driven by trauma. I really do. I think it's driven by trauma. That trauma induces difficulty in focusing, uh, thoughts that can't be reined in. The wheels are spinning all the time. You can't shut it off. You can't concentrate
Right.
on one. So attention is impeded. And a lot of that comes just from trauma. You
Yeah.
get in this constant fight or flight mode where you can't be still enough to focus on one thing.
Well, yeah,
So,
and it's constant. Like I think I remember someone when I was reading into it when I was first learning about it. That there's like it's the inhibition of forethought too, right? Like there's
yeah,
no future thinking generally. It's like it's only focusing on the present.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
sure.
it's mainly because they can't slow down the wheels long enough to think in the future.
Yeah, essentially, you
So,
have to like manually focus on that. That's the other thing.
right.
The way you pull focus, and it's real interesting to look at the weirdness on that. I mean, it's a to me it was obviously like a like evolutionary response, to being able to deal with
Oh,
like
yes, it's back to the fight or flight thing. I
yeah,
mean, you had trauma that's keyed you up to the point, okay, we're expecting disaster. So
yeah,
military PTSD patients, I mean,
right. Speaking of nuclear war,
they're still fighting the Viet Cong, or um,
I mean,
I
which
had a
war do we want to go to? Like,
yeah, pick one.
pick one. I mean,
Yeah,
right now
yeah,
we're in how many different conflicts between Syria,
well,
Yemen,
we don't
like
know for sure because they don't tell us everything.
thankfully some GIs spent some time learning about bongs and, Korea and Vietnam, decided to bring some Thai stick back and,
Yeah,
we at least have a medicine to help with all that,
yeah.
post-traumatic funness. Um, do you see a lot of that in the field? A lot of the veterans coming in for
We have,
PTSD.
yeah, we have a fair number of veterans. So far and away, the most trauma is family,
Yeah,
just family, local stuff. And I'd never realized how bad it was. I guess I should have, but I didn't until I got into it. But it's just everywhere. Now,
yeah,
I think most of the people that go into service, they're traumatized before they ever go. That's one reason they go. They get in these families, and this is the way out. And probably their fathers and grandfathers were in service, just like mine were, and a lot of them were drinking too much and had PTSD themselves, and they beat up their kids and said, "Be a real man. You got to join the Marines or the Army or whatever."
right. Yeah,
So you create this ongoing multi-generational thing. So
yeah,
we've been we've been at war since, I guess, since World War II. I mean, just nonstop. One
yeah,
thing
pretty
or another.
much. I think there was might be like 2 weeks where we weren't, you
Yeah,
know,
maybe, yeah,
like so. I mean, really between like the Iran like Contra stuff and then like
yeah.
until Bush
Yeah,
got in.
I was active duty. I was in the army. I was active duty during the Iran thing,
Yeah,
and my timing, yeah, it was providentially. By the time I got out of training, there was no big active war going on, so
have you
I
looked
was
at the
blessed.
any of the protests and stuff happening over there? There's been some interesting stuff with
Well,
that.
yeah, I grew up, with the Vietnamese protests, anti-war people, and of course, I kind of was resistant to that. My dad was a Navy pilot in World War II. Everybody in our family, we always wore uniforms. So I was,
Yeah,
a big patriot. I joined the Army in 71. Um,
yeah.
just,
There's protests happening over there now that are we're not sure if it's actual protests or if it's caused by Western influence. That's super
Well, it
interesting.
is, yeah. It's
You
hard to
know,
tell. I mean, so
yep.
many of them. In fact, yeah, it's just hard to tell. I don't know.
Yeah, I
We've
remember
got our fingers in so many
Pompeo
pies.
meeting with the MEK and like meeting with the leaders of that protest as well. Got pictures with them, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean,
These are horrible people. Pompeo is just, oh my God.
it's
CIA.
also, we've been fighting over there for pretty much opiate control for the most part since
Absolutely.
probably when you were there, you know. So
Yeah.
just to push big pharma harder as we
Well,
roll back to the original.
the Alphabet Boys have been funding themselves with that stuff for my whole life. They're flying it out
Yeah.
of the Golden Triangle, and they're
Mm-hmm.
flying it out of Afghanistan and Colombia and
Oliver
all,
North, all that fun
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely.
The Contras and the Sandinistas. And I mean, do we need to go back to this Tom Clancy book or, you
We never
know?
left it.
Yeah,
We never,
we never left it. It's still fear and present danger. Like it's still
we just
that.
yeah, we just redefined it a little. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
pretty
new
much.
enemy is Russia, or
Oh,
Ukrainian Nazis are our heroes.
McCarthy's rolling over. You know, but it's working for that industrial complex. I gotta admit, you know.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but anyway, I don't want
See,
to keep you here too long. So, you know, not that I wouldn't talk to you for another 3 hours. You know,
it's an
but
honor to talk to you.
like my all my audience has ADHD. They barely got through the first 3 minutes. You know, so like they probably already moved on, clicked on another thing. Um,
Cut it up into 3-minute loops.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what I'll be doing. But anyway, I did want to shout out some stuff that you're doing. We always love supporting mutual aid and charity here at the Indie News Network. So, you know, I know you do some of that as well on the side. If you want to tell people how to find that information.
Yeah, we do
Um,
have a little animal sanctuary. Right at the moment we've got 9 cats and 7 dogs, and my wife set up a little um, sanctuary and not for profit. So that's helped us get food and stuff. Some of the places like Walmart and Costco and so on have been very gracious with giving us
food
their
and
spilled
that's
food
nice.
and products they're not using. So that's been a help. But that's about all we do. My wife is old Yugoslavian communist, so
Nice.
she's always wringing your hands over the state
Yeah,
of the
I can't
country.
blame her. I can't blame her. We're definitely friends of the commies here. You know, so but we have plenty of them with pets named Che and you know all
There
that
you
fun
go.
stuff. You know, I think we've got the mix is Che. Like I think another one has Guevara as the name, and then there's
That's right.
Tito.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you know,
We
a
have
few Lennons. You know, so
my wife did. She was born in Zagreb, and she did humanitarian relief in the Balkan Wars for about 3 years under mortar fire.
yeah,
Anyways, one of the people she worked with helped out over there. He sent us a giant portrait of Tito, so we have that hanging in our entryway downstairs.
nice. Yeah, don't worry, that's just Grandpa. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's what she's telling everybody.
Don't worry about that. He's a nice guy. Yeah, I mean, I've got friends working over at RT and stuff like that. Shout out to Fee. You know, we had Vanessa Beeley and Wyatt Reed on Tar Reed's podcast Monday, and they've been over in the Donbass and stuff like that. And Wyatt, I think, works for Sputnik. Vanessa's been in Syria forever, and back and forth between that. So that's been really interesting. People should do their homework on that stuff.
Yep, yep.
But almost all of them, I think, have definitely imbibed a little for that anxiety relief. You know, so they need it more than ever. But anyway, it's been lovely having you here. I appreciate your time. Yes, sir. We'll do it again sometime, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was real fun. For the people at home, enjoy the episode. I'll probably air this alongside some, other guests. That way it's not all just serious doctor talk. But, you'll probably see that right after this, I'm hoping. But anyway, to the boys and girls at home, good night. Enjoy your weed and, drive safe.
You too. Be safe, Reese. Thanks for having me.
You too, friend.